welcome back to Contemporary Black Voices. Before I get started, I want to acknowledge the expertise and wisdom of our producer, Mr. Carl Booker, who sits behind the screen, the scene, and get this show going for us. So we really couldn't have done this without his knowledge.
He's a dictator.
I'm calling him a dictator. But it's great to know that in San Antonio that we have a studio like this.
Yeah.
Never was aware of it
absolutely.
until I came here my first time. So kudos to Carl on bringing us up to the 21st century.
Yes. Here's a name I have for him. I call him the keeper of the culture.
Oh,
Because
okay.
he really is all about our culture.
Absolutely.
And has been at it for a very long
Yeah.
time.
Yes.
So
And those
I
of you in
appreciate
San
that.
Antonio, if you're not aware, there is a magazine called Black Life Texas. They are around the city. I know HEB off of East Houston Street or WW White Road has copies up in the front entrance of the store. You can get the real estate stuff. So go online. If you can't find the paper, go to blacklifetexas.com and you'll see all of the previous issues. All righty. So, Dorinda.
Yes.
Thank you for staying.
Yes.
Appreciate
You're
it.
welcome. I'm happy to. I feel privileged to be invited, so thank you.
So, we're talking about DEI, the removal of programming and initiatives. So, this is bringing it home to us. As Black Americans, should we sound the alarm?
We have to, and I think you're doing it with this program. I think we're doing it to a certain degree with what Carl is doing with the Blackson San Antonio brand, if you will. But I think we also need to do more to sound the alarm louder to the broader community. There are more of us who should raise our voices. And I think that there are multiple ways to do that. I'm thinking back to 2020 when the response to the George Floyd murder happened, and there were lots of protests. And during that time, I was also a part of a community leadership program. And let's see, I was the only African American in this program. And so some of my colleagues in the cohort were white or Hispanic, but the white ones in particular wanted to know, well, what could they do? And they did express that, well, they were afraid to go out and protest. I was like, okay, cool. That's one form, marching is one form of protest, of standing up. But I think that there are other things that can be done. And I would say the same thing to answer the question about should we sound the alarm? I think that alarm can be sounded in multiple ways. So you all couldn't see off camera before we came on. We were looking at how do we get the timing going. So Caleb pulled out his phone. He was going to sound the alarm on his iPhone. And so, of course, Carl has all kinds of state-of-the-art equipment here. So there are multiple ways I think that the alarm can be sounded. We talked about the publication that is available at HEB. They're digital. You can get it on the digital version. I think Fred over here, Professor Fred, also writes, and both of these gentlemen write and produce things. So I think that things the way that the alarm is sounded happens in multiple ways. And when we're talking about sounding the alarm, I think what we're really talking about is educating people. Like, why should I care about this is one of the things I think we really need to express right now. And to people in my age group who may feel like, well, I'm retired now. I'm out of the fight. But no, really, you are in the fight. If you'll remember, back for the George Floyd protests, a lot of the ones who were leading that, those were the young college students, the same as it was in the 60s. You had the college students, the young people. You had the church it was a part of it. And, I really feel like the church has been asleep in some ways right now with what's going on, especially with DE&I. And I think one of the reasons that might be happening is that when we talk about DE&I, you're also talking about the LGBTQ community. And so some people may have a problem with that. But I feel like if I'm willing to stop somebody else's, well, if I'm willing to not do anything because I want to stop somebody else's progress, I don't know. That to me sounds like that's sinful.
And you know, that sounding the alarm was sounded this week from the NAACP chapter in Florida. They approve a travel ban on Florida.
It's good.
And that's a powerful move. I said, whoa, I never knew that the NAACP moved like that, but they have sounded the alarm, travel ban. Of course, DeSantis is laughing at it, but it's actions like that and awareness like that throughout the community. When I talk about the community, I'm talking about the state and national Black community, that there is something going on, and we need to listen to those drums to hear what's going on.
And how about voting? This all ties into voting, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If you don't vote, you're going to get people like Greg Abbott and DeSantis. They're going to try to destroy all these programs if they possibly can. So we need to really, and we do have a group here that pushes people getting out to vote. And I think it's critical that we vote.
Absolutely.
And awareness about who is running for office. You and I need to talk offline, but in the school district that we sit in, there is a person running for the school board who I have found out was an insurrectionist. And so I think that alarm needs to be sounded, because if this person should sit on a school board, what is that person's intention? I'll give you the name later.
But going back to the travel ban in Florida, it made me think about the bus boycott, the Selma bus boycott, and how that affected that community. And it's really sad that a lot of times things boil down to money. And if we really decided that we were going to abide by that travel ban and not go to Florida, to go to Carnival, to get on those cruises, we're not going into Disney, Universal, and all the other places.
Right.
I think it would have an effect. We do have money and we do spend it.
Yeah, I think
it's a voice that we should use.
And it's time for us to really look at that. Do we have to go to Florida? No.
Well, does that come down to what our buddy over here all talks about? I don't know, leadership. He claims that we don't have any leadership. How do you respond to that?
Is that for me? You go, Caleb.
Because I've made it clear too many times on where I stand on it. Because again, and I hate to beat the drum over and over and over again. I just think that we're in a different age, in a different time. And I think as far as social media and just using the examples around the world, different movements that have taken place via social media, through Twitter, through Instagram, people coming together, and it was coordinated by the masses.
So what group are you reaching? If you're saying you're replacing leadership with social media, I don't know if that's that good.
Well, no, I'm saying just it doesn't take one person to say we're going to be this here at this time at this place. It was something. Those movements that were successful were done through Twitter, via Twitter or Instagram, that were saying, "Hey, this is what's going on." It was a sharing of information and saying, "This is what we should do. We should meet at Tahrir Square, or we should meet it at this location, this place." And those movements were very successful, and they were movements by the people. There was no one individual that the police could knock on their door and take out.
Well, let's go back. In the 60s, we had Malcolm X and Dr. King. And were we more organized? I know the organizations were different. Malcolm with the more belligerent, and King with the more nonviolent approach. Were we better off because we had leaders?
Well, I mean,
And would you consider Jesse Jackson to have been a leader?
ask you this. Once you had the murder of King,
It went downhill.
so today's movements, if you can take out, there's no one person to take out, and so there's a diversity.
Well, you're arguing that maybe Chris is right. We do need leaders, aren't you?
No, I'm saying that.
Were you saying that Dr. King was that leader, and then when they took him out, everything went down? Is that what you're saying? I may misread what you're saying.
I thought that's what you said when I asked what happened to the movement after the murder of King. You said the movement went down.
Okay, that's true. But at least we had leadership. and it was effective.
Well, here with technology, there's a disbursement of responsibility, and so there's no one person that the police can knock on their door and take out. There's no one person to target.
Well, you're just giving us a fact. You're not putting a value judgment on it. Is it good or is it bad?
I think what we're seeing now, we have grassroots leaders, and some of them don't want to be called leaders, but they're running some serious grassroots communications via YouTube, and their followership is getting high. And they're sounding the alarm every time something goes down, every time something goes wrong. For example, can't wait to see whether a particular, I'll go ahead and call his name, Tariq Nasheed or Jason Black. You know, I have not seen them yet talk about the approval of HB 999, but it's going to probably come. But I do know that another YouTube influencer has already sounded the alarm on that topic as well. So there are several of these influencers who are operating in YouTube and other spheres where they're getting that communications out quicker and faster and more efficiently. So I think the word now is not necessarily leaders, but influencers, because some of those influencers have enough power now to where they can say, meet me at, and they'll get a large number of folks showing up.
There's a fine line between love and hate. And there's a fine line between the influencer and leader.
But you know, the change of time, the change of time, you know, they're influencers. And so they're out there and they are really getting that information out quick. There was a foundational Black American conference in DC that pulled in more people than they anticipated. So the leaders are there, but they're not in the traditional sense the way we're used to seeing them as well.
You're saying they're more on the local.
We're seeing
level?
them more in the cyber world.
Yeah.
So, I want to just reel this back. I know that all of you educated. You touched a little bit on social learning. You talked a little bit about having people in the classroom. And so I want Dr. Rowe to talk a little bit about that and talk a little bit about interest convergence and how the attack on DEI and how that affects it, and about how DEI mitigates interest convergence.
I think that when we're talking about the convergence of these thoughts, ideas, and movements, I think it depends on, excuse me, the individual. If you want to go back to the students, for a lot of them, so I mentioned that a lot of the protests and things that had happened were led by students. But for a large number of students, they didn't participate because it was like, that has nothing to do with me. A large number of our students now are in integrated communities. So maybe back when you and I went to school, your best friend might have been somebody who looked like you, somebody who lived in the community. Now, like with my children, their best friends don't look like them.
Right, yeah.
So their experiences are very much the same, but while their experiences may be the same, but when other entities come in, their experience might change. Like, for example, my son's best friend is somebody white that he went to school with. If they're both driving out on the highway at night, his white friend is going to have a very different experience than what my son has if he's pulled over by the police. And he realizes that. So even though he might think he, and I won't say his friend's name, are the same, I know that deep down he knows that they're not. Right. But it's like, what can I do about it? But then on the other hand, you have some other students who might know that it's a different experience, and then it's like, well, what can I do about it? I want to do something about it. The only reason they think they can do something about it is because of this convergence of these ideas that you're talking about, because they have been educated enough to know that this is not right, something can be done about it. So that's why I feel like education is really important, because if you suppress knowledge, then you will suppress behavior. What can I do about it? So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think it really boils down to the experience of individuals and the knowledge that they have. I want to jump on that conversation about leaders. I do agree that leadership itself has changed, and the need for having one voice speak for us and we all rally behind it. I think historically, not counting necessarily the movement of the 60s, but if you even go back to, I'm thinking about, because during Black History Month, I did something on Black resistance, right? And so if you even think back to during slavery times when there were uprisings and rebellions,
Right.
most of the ones that were unsuccessful happened because another person who looked just like me went and snitched and told what the plan
Yes.
was.
Right.
So there's this whole dichotomy of us being together, but not really being for each other. So I'm a part of this community, but I'm not down with everything that goes on, even though it would benefit me if we got together. But almost like the example I gave of the church, it's like, well, we know we should speak as one voice, but there's this other thing that if we speak as one voice, we're going to be supporting the LGBTQ community. So therefore, I'm going to cut off my own hand to spite somebody else.
I agree. You know, one of the most, I think you mentioned it, Dr. Rowe, knowledge is so important. And I find teaching at the university and the community colleges here, they didn't want that. They don't want that. They want you to turn out robots, get married at 22, have 5 kids by you're 40, by 80 die, and don't challenge anything. And they really put up resistance
Yeah.
to challenges, and especially coming from the Black perspective.
Yeah.
And I think they're very careful. There's 2 things about hiring Black. Is when you hire Black, or you can hire somebody like Candace Owens, who we're going to talk about later, or Clarence Thomas. All you've done is hire a Black face.
That's all you did.
Yeah, and what they're afraid of is the Black mind.
Ooh,
They're afraid of the Black mind.
you're preaching now. That's exactly right. That's what I believe that.
Yeah.
So yeah, when we talk about leadership, I'm down for there being multiple voices, and I am definitely down for it. Doesn't matter if I'm down for it, using social media and different ways that we spread the word. That's just the way that it is now. I mean, you have schools now that don't use textbooks at all. And of course, when I went to school, you had the textbook.
Yes.
You went to the library to get whatever knowledge that you needed. Things have just changed, but I would hate to think that Candace Owens is the spokesperson for Black America.
But that's what they do, Dr. Rowe.
Yeah, but that's them. And so she was talking about the call to action or sounding the alarm. We need to sound the alarm, because we cannot allow other people to select who our leaders are.
Right.
I agree,
So-
and that's what they do. Just
Yeah.
too much, yes.
So it looks like we're running out of time, but we are going to go ahead and take a break here and get ready for Hot Topics, which is really going to be an extension of this conversation anyway. So get ready for a great discussion.